Hello, everyone. Today I'm with Susan Williams, MFT, and Susan is an adult and child Jungian analyst and a member of the CG Jung Institute of San Francisco. She trained in London at the Association of Jungian Analysts and currently has a private practice in Berkeley in California. Susan has extensive experience working with children with disabilities in hospitals, clinics, and schools, and has consulted to many Bay Area schools programs for children with autistic spectrum disorders. She has taught both in the UK and the US on topics including the Numinous, the unbearable weight of truth, expanded states of consciousness, aliveness and deadness. And Susan organised a conference, I think it was in 2019, wasn't it, Susan? Encountering the Numinous, Depth Psychotherapy, Analysis and Psychedelics. And you are about to speak at a conference coming up at Pacifica Graduate Institute. And I can't remember what that's called, Índividuation and Psychedelics, Conversations with Jungian Analysts. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having a conversation.
So much rich material in there. And I wonder whether we could we just start? I often like to start with people. Could you just tell us a little bit about how you stumbled across Jung and became an analyst, and then we can take up the topic of individuation and psychedelics.
Right. Well, there's kind of the kind of more familiar story on the as an adult, and then there's also more of an inner story of how I became a Jungian analyst that I only discovered as I was about to begin the training. But I was living in London, and I had met a new friend who was in Jungian analysis, and it was like a light bulb went off, and I said, that's what I'm looking for. And it was like I was wandering around, and it was like I knew at that moment, and she gave me the name of her analyst, and that began the process, and which was beginning an analysis. And I eventually realized that it was right for me to train. I had been working before that as a pediatric occupational therapist with children in hospitals through the NHS and in clinics. But I knew that I wanted more of a depth perspective and that I needed to bring that to the work. But as I was applying to the Institute, I realized that I knew this as a young child, that I recalled that when I was about 6 or 7, I used to love looking at my father's books and his bookshelf. And there was one book in particular that I loved, but I was too young to read it. And it was Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And I remember saying at age 6 or 7, I said, Daddy, that's it. When I grow up, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to call it that. Memories, Dreams, Reflections.
I don't think Carl Jung will be happy if you just take his title.
I know he may not be very happy with it. I'd like to be a little more original than that too. So I'm not one for repetition, but I guess it's in 6. That's all I could think of.
Yeah, that was the best.
But I think there was a deep knowing. So when I got to London and heard somebody was in Jungian analysis, I realized that light bulb connected me to that childhood person who knew as well. So there was this
it was like a remembering or a reminding or something like that. I mean, it just rang a bell.
Exactly. It was more of a remembering. Exactly.
And just so let's get this straight, Susan. You were born in the US, but your heritage is what, Irish and English?
Irish, and I lived in the UK, but I lived there as an Irish citizen because I have an Irish passport. So that's why I could live and work work for the NHS and live in the UK. Okay, but so I eventually came back to this country.
Why? Why did you go back?
Oh, that's another kind of mysterious thing. I wasn't quite sure at the time, but I think I was called back. And I actually think it is probably the work with psychedelics that I'm doing now. I think that I knew there was a new edge I needed to go to. And I think that there was something kind of conducive of being in the San Francisco Bay Area to be able to do this, to open up new doors.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, look, I remember when we first had a talk. It seems to me there's a couple of things. Firstly, where I'm coming from this is that I had an experience of a 17-year-old, and it was watching the sun come up at Bondi Beach after having taken some acid, and it was like watching the dawn of creation. There's that immersion, and sometimes I've thought, what happens? It's like it marks you out, an experience like that. On one hand, there's this tremendous experience of the mystery, so much larger than ourselves and the cosmos, and there's something so wonderfully healing about that. But on the other hand, it's to get a language for that and to get some kind of words for it. And I found in Jung, when, I don't know, the anima mundi or the mysterium tremendum or the numinous, and he gives a language for those kinds of things. And then, there's this thing of this renaissance that's happening at the moment, which seems to be huge in terms of psychedelics, and is happening, as you say, a lot of it seems to be coming from the Bay Area of California. But so there's these two things happening, and this is something you've had a lot of experience with. So how did you get into psychedelics? Let's take it from there. Psychedelic therapy, right, or the interest in psychedelics.
It's actually not that dissimilar to the story I told you about becoming a Jungian analyst. It was like a remembering for me. Again, there's the kind of more contemporary story where I could tell you where some, again, I had a friend who was going down to the jungle, and it was again like that's exactly what I meant to do. But I realized that as a child, I remember hearing about those studies that they were doing in the 50s and 60s. And I remember, I don't know, maybe I overheard, some adults speaking about it. And I remember again thinking, that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in expanded states of consciousness. And what I knew was I had no interest in doing psychedelics with my teenage friends. And I thought that had no interest for me, because I knew that if I was going to open up, I was going to go very far. And I wanted to be sure I would be in a safe setting for that.
Right.
And I think it's part of how I view psychedelics now is for me, my relationship is not a recreational relationship. It's a sacred relationship.
Yeah. So you had that sense of the sacred even at that time.
Exactly. And that it needed to be in the right container. And I think what ancient people have done throughout time, of knowing that this is sacramental, and this is, and psychedelics really work best in the right set and with the right set and the right setting. We talk about set as in the intentions that you set, that there's preparation for it, and that there's a safe container, a temenos for us.
And a temenos was a sacred space, wasn't it? It again, which is what you were just saying prior.
Exactly. That it isn't about just a substance. It's actually about the energy that is created all around that experience.
And in a bit of Jung jargon, if you're opening to the deep unconscious as well, then you want to do that in some kind of thoughtful manner.
Exactly. And also, like when you described your experience on the beach and that sense of that absolute, the morning of creation, the birth of the world, that sense that these experiences, I think, are like a big dream that takes us a lifetime to integrate.
Yeah.
And there's something about being in the right setting so that you can actually recognize that, like a big dream, it's sometimes years later where you can say, oh my gosh, now I get that. And now I get that. And it's only with living life that you actually are able to reveal the other layers of it.
A life of integration. And perhaps we don't fully integrate, really, do we? Meaning, it's endless.
There's no end. I don't think there's an end point. Yes.
Yeah, or bottomless, or whatever you want to say. But it's like we try to integrate as much as we can. But there's something very lovely about that.
Yeah, exactly. There's something about being in that process. Yeah. Yes, like I said, uncovering layers and revealing and remembering.
And Susan, what experience did you have when you actually when you did that?
So I was with the elders of the Sicope Nation of Ecuador.
Right.
I think they're also called the Sequoia, but they're Sicope, and this is a tribe that had very little exposure to the West.
Right.
And I feel really gifted and blessed to be with them and to spend a couple of weeks there, to be able to be immersed in this experience. And I have to say, it changed my life, and it really set me on this path. And I learned something about developing a relationship with the medicine. And it's something that I feel very strongly now, is that I don't use psychedelics because it's a relationship. I don't use people. I don't want to be used. And so I won't use psychedelics. I relate to them. And what I learned during that time was how to form a relationship with this medicine and to talk in their language, which would be the heavenly beings. And I guess what I would say is the first really big experience, which has been like a big dream that I know I am continuing to work and will probably work for the rest of my life, was a vision that came to me. I was in an experience where there was all of these psychedelic lights, and it was really beautiful and amazing. But I started to speak to the medicine, and for whatever reason, I realized on one level this could sound inflated, but this is what came out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Is that I said, with all due respect, this is amazing. This is beautiful, but this is not why I came. I said, again, in all due respect, you do not need to wow me. You don't need to impress me. I've had a lot of amazing experiences in my life, but I came here not to be wowed or to have another great experience to go home with, but to learn the secrets of the universe. And as soon as I said that, it was like a light switch went off and all the visuals went away, and I had a teacher, and a teacher emerged.
Wow.
And that teacher remains with me. And that experience was profound. And at that time, I had my first big vision that I continue to work. And in this vision, I looked over at one of the other participants. They were in a hammock next to me, and they had a water bottle underneath their hammock. And I looked over at the hammock, and I saw all of what I would call my thoughts in their water bottle. And I thought, wait a minute, how is this possible? How are my thoughts in somebody else's water bottle? I don't even own that bottle. And then I started to realize, I was like, oh, none of this belongs to us. That we bottle things up, and we bottle up thoughts in our mind like a water bottle, and say, this is mine, that's yours, and that we're separate. And I realized that thoughts and images and all of these are maybe more like water flowing, or like weather that permeates the atmosphere. And we bottle things up into containers or to divisions and say yours and mine, but it's all part of the vast cosmic sea.
Yeah.
And
We've
so,
been
that was a big experience.
We've been kind of, what is it? We were force fed on the capitalist model a little, weren't we? And secular materialism and all that. And the whole idea of mine is so strong. But that old, what is it, indigenous idea sometimes, or old idea or something of just the interconnectedness that, and the influence between all things, you know. Like sometimes I think we talk about climate change or political action or whatever, but it's that kind of experience that that the world is alive and everything's influencing each other, that actually brings a relationship, as you call it, a different kind of relationship with the earth, right?
Makes it alive. You know, one of the things I was thinking of speaking to at the conference is that is a metaphor, is that for the work with psychedelics is the way that astronauts who first saw the Earth from space were profoundly changed by this experience and often described it as a moment of epiphany, of ecstasy, of awe, of transcendence. And they had to come up with a term to speak to this, and they talk about it as the overview effect. And people, like Edgar Mitchell,
they were never the same
churches,
again, in a way, were they? Like it changed them as people.
Changed them. There was no there's no borders from above when you look at it, where you don't see the division of race, of country, of class. You see the earth as a whole living organism, and you see its fragility too, and that it's that we're in this together. And so that a psychedelic journey is like that. It's like that cosmic view that gives us a view from above, where you suddenly see the whole in a flash, and that's like, oh, now I see how it's all connected, rather than
but there's
like each one of us.
There is two sides to it, though, isn't there? Because it's like, I remember reading somewhere that the word cosmos, originally it came from something like a fitting together or something. So there's something so healing to have an experience of how the world fits together, the cosmos of the world or whatever. But then again, we live in a secular materialist society, so there's that. It's a huge thing to actually. It's a lot of work to try to bring a language to that, or to, I suppose those astronauts have been thinking for however long it is now, 40, 50, 60 years, of how to describe something, how to bring a language towards it.
Yeah, exactly. No, because like I said, these experiences really do kind of, I think they shatter the old self.
Yeah.
And I think this is connected to one of the things you mentioned that I've written about, is the unbearable weight of truth, is that we can't step into the new without somehow of letting that old self, these old ideas, be shattered, and to really be able to allow ourselves to be able to be disassembled in the service of really facing into maybe what might be unbearable, is to, I think we face it all the time about how we don't, it's like you pass a homeless person on the street, and it's kind of, if you really let in the full impact of that, we tell ourselves stories to make it all okay to walk by, or we all do this all the time. We tell ourselves, stories like that. But when you have these experiences where you suddenly see the way that everything is connected, and that there is that is an illusion, that there is a division, it changes you, and it changes how you relate to everyone and everything.
And there's a weight to that. There's a weight to that truth, perhaps, which is, going back to the recreational use of like I remember
Mhm.
reading somewhere that John Lennon had 500 LSD trips or
Right.
whatever. I don't know whether it's exactly true, but I could imagine he had quite a lot. And that is a lot of experiences, but then that kind of that weight, because the thing is that once there has been those experiences, they have to be integrated in a way, don't they? They have to be taken in, and the world has to be related to in a different way.
Yeah. Well, for me, when my experience is that I can't not know what I know anymore.
Yeah, that's
it. And I think that's part of it. And one of the things that's changed around this work is that I cannot compartmentalize in the same way. And so it's like I can't pretend that I don't see or don't know what I've seen.
Yeah.
And so that's what changed it, because I think that's where, how we can live in a very divided world, because we're very good at compartmentalizing and dividing up things and telling ourselves stories to make it okay for us to feel okay in the world as it is. And that's how we survive in the world we live in.
But there's something good to that weight too, isn't there? There's a substance to that weight. I mean, it's not all heavy. I mean, it just seems to me that it's good to move away from that I'm just speaking for myself, that recreational idea, perhaps, to something which is more weighty and has a little bit of responsibility. And that's maybe what some people wouldn't think from the outside, if they haven't had any exposure to that there is that kind of substance.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, I don't feel critical of people who do use psychedelics recreationally. It's just, for me, that's not my relationship with them.
Yeah.
Is that for me? I can't. It's just I'm not. Like I said, when having had this experience, it's like I can't. I can't actually have that other kind of relationship. I'm sorry, there's a barking dog.
That's all right.
I was hoping to warn the neighbor ahead of time that this was like, please stop the dog.
So just going from there, Susan, you had this experience, and then how did it come that it became part of your work, your therapy? How did you get clients and start to talk to people about all this? Did you have kind of an aha where, now I have to start working more in that area, or?
Well, as it came back and I started to have more experiences with different medicines and trying to understand this path. And I eventually trained.
Yeah.
I trained at with MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. So I trained to work with MDMA and PTSD.
Yeah.
And I trained to work with ketamine and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. I started at a program at CIIS. I kind of left and did my own path after that, but I've done training in various kind of work with various medicines, and so I'm one of the people involved in this field of what is now called psychedelic enhanced psychotherapy. And so, what I do want to come back to is when you were mentioning about the heaviness, because one of the things that I wanted to say to that is that there's what I view it is more of a sense of freedom that what these medicines offer is the rather than just the heavy weight, it's the actual sense of the liberation of this. And that's what I see in the work of people who have, say, treatment resistant depression, or people who have severe PTSD. I mean, I've had patients who couldn't leave the house because of the level of their trauma and the way they would get triggered. And to see that after years and years of maybe of analysis, somebody only able to go so far, and to see that when combined with depth work, and deep work with the psychedelics, the lifting up that happens of this, this like heavy, it's like the ceiling that blocks us getting any further.
So what's that
And
all
so,
about?
I mean,
But why does it work like that, do you think? What have you come up with over the years?
well, the way that these medicines work is very different than the way that traditional kind of allopathic medicine works, which is, usually Western medicine is often much more about symptom reduction. And like traditionally with a antidepressant, um, once you're off of it, hopefully sometimes there's some rewiring, but maybe some of these medications people have to be on for the rest of their life
Yeah.
to get the benefit.
Yeah.
Whereas with these medicines, you may need only, 1 to 3 sessions, say, perhaps, to be able to get benefit. And they work on different regions of the brain. One is things like psilocybin and some of the other traditional psychedelics work on a region called, they dampen an area called a series, an area including several parts called the default mode network.
Yeah.
And the default mode network region is very connected to our sense of our identity and who we are. And it's where we can kind of get stuck on a stuck identity. It's like somebody with an addiction. I'm never going to be able to, this will always be like this. Or somebody severely depressed, it'll always be like this. It will never change. This is who I am.
In my language, it's an old program running around and around. Is that
exactly.
what we're talking about?
This is who I am. Exactly. Yeah. It will never get better if and this is like shaking up the snow globe. And everything has a chance to be able to see things that otherwise you couldn't see.
Yeah.
I've had patients say, I've actually could watch my brain firing, and I can see the pathways going to all the familiar places. And then suddenly I'm realizing, oh, I could go a different way.
Wow.
And I could turn the other way. So, I mean, those are the kind of experience, they change your life. Yeah.
That's kind of like neuroscience, the kind of things neuroscience is talking about at the moment, isn't it? But it also makes me think of Lionel Corbett and, it's Jung's idea too, isn't it? The healing power of the numinous,
exactly.
It heals.
Exactly. The studies at Johns Hopkins with psilocybin with terminally ill patients, they said that actually, I can't remember the percentage, but it was a very high percentage of the people rated as one of the top 5 spiritually meaningful experiences of their life, up there with, the birth of their first child. And it was that sense of the awe, the numinous, kind of quality of that I'm part of something bigger. And this sense that actually that this, for many of them, this recognition that this wasn't the end. And what it helped was with a lot of them with their anxiety.
There's something about this mystery that is greater than ourselves, which in some previous time we might have called the mystical experience. There is something that seems to be, well, for me personally, so necessary about that, because it's kind of what we crave, whether we know that or not, if you want to put it that way.
Exactly. I think there is this deep longing for meaning, and meaning outside of just this personal egoic I as well. And also, outside of, consuming more.
Yeah. So what do you think about the sacred? What does it mean to you these days? How would you language it?
The language, the sacred?
Yeah, well, maybe that's not a good way of putting it. How would you experience it? But
right.
What does it mean?
Right. Well, one of the things that I've just, that is in the chapter that's going to be part of this book coming out, as well as I actually spoke a little bit about this and how it relates to the work that I'm doing, is that I had a recurring dream when I was working as, really working with these medicines. And I was waking every morning with almost the same dream. And it was a voice that was almost like a command. And it said, re-infuse Numen into matter. And it kept repeating it like this, re-infuse Numen into matter. And I realized
maybe it meant re-infuse. Sorry, I'm butting in for 1 second, but it meant re-infuse Eric Neumann into matter.
Oh, right. Okay.
Maybe you got that wrong. No, I don't think so.
Jungian humor here. Exactly. Right. Right. But what I will say is what I took for that is that we have separated out spirit and the sacred from matter, from the day-to-day, and that what I realized is that it was a call to me to reinfuse the sacred into everything, to make everything sacred and to make everything holy. Right. And part of that is that even just the way that I work, and I realized that even in the way that I work, every place that I was repeating it are things that were kind of drained of Numen. I was, that I was being called to what is it to make everything sacred. And so I realized that, and it led to a piece of work that I have been working on, which is around working with the energetics of psychedelics, meaning that I was motivated because I had a patient with severe trauma who had severe, kind of very complex disabilities as well, who wasn't able to take any psychedelics. And because it just wouldn't have been safe with all their medications. And so I began to work with them with as if they are on psychedelics, working with it, with the energetics of it. And I realized that we put so much focus onto matter as the ultimate, kind of, reality. And that actually, that I could contact the energy of these medicines and share it with her in the field. And that is, and so I think.
How do you do that? I mean, to me, that comes under this kind of broader category of how to be open to the numinous or whatever in life, but how?
Well, I drew on ancient traditions. I drew on what ancient people did in times when they would go into dark places and they would be in incubation and they would use ritual and incantation and enchantment. And I knew that I could access the energy of this medicine and in these states, so that I could actually get myself into a state where I could find myself as almost like a vibrational match to the medicine. And one of the things that I realized is that we have kind of forgotten that we not only share viruses in an invisible field, we can also share gifts. So just as we share, just as the mycelial network of, that connects trees and plants they can share their nutrients, we can share as well in the energetic field.
That's
and
good.
That, and so that's where, so I began to work that way of working energetically, so that, again, recognizing that this focus on matter may blind us to these other dimensions of experience.
So that's like the old, it's kind of a bit shamanic in a way, isn't it? It's like, or that outlook, which is attuned
exactly
to those kinds of things.
Exactly. That I think, you and I spoke beforehand briefly about Peter Kingsley, and I said that I've been very grateful to his work because it was a real inspiration to me. And when he speaks about these these kind of wisdom traditions at the heart of these non-dual practices that are at the heart of Western civilization, and that I think we've often felt we had to go to the East for those, but that actually that these kind of ancient practices of magic and mystery, and like I said, of incantation, and
I mean, I was one of those people.
there.
I was one of those people that went off to the East, and in meditation, you know, of course, that there's an opening to the numinous or whatever. But I also found in Peter Kingsley, it's something very, what's the word? Fulfilling on some very deep level, that there's this Western tradition, you know, pre-Socratic tradition of people going to caves and incubating and what is it? Nurturing the experience of the sacred, basically. And maybe in the West we just have forgotten that part of our history to a degree. That's why his book is so interesting.
Exactly. No, I think we've forgotten how to access these, what in psychedelics we would call expanded states of consciousness. We can have access to them through meditation, and you can have access to them in stillness, and like I said, as he would say, lying in dark places and incubation, and through chant and through song, that we can access these expanded states. And in that state, that that we can be able to, what I'm interested in is the way that we can actually, like I said, share our capacities. I mean, I think we share things in the invisible field all the time. I often say to my patients, anxiety is an infectious disease. It's just like COVID. I mean, if you've ever around somebody who's anxious, you can feel it, you catch it, you feel it. But I think that these other states can also be shared in the field.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm just thinking that maybe indigenous cultures as well. What about your kind of Irish ancestry? What do they say about all this?
Well, that's been the surprising piece for me, I have to say, in this work, that I hadn't quite expected. But I originally I opened, my first opening to this was going, to Latin America. But what I found through my work was I started to have experiences that were bringing me back to my own roots, my own ancestors, and some of the forgotten wisdom from that line. And what I found was that I have been discovering more about something that there's another writer I really like called John Moriarty, who wrote a book called Dreamtime. And in that, he talks about that, we talk about there's an Aboriginal dream time and the dreaming, but that there is an Irish dream time. And what I have found is what has been coming to me, and part of, I think I said earlier, that I had a teacher, and it's been teaching me some of the ancient song lines that run through my own Celtic pagan bloodline. And what I've been finding is really returning to some of those ancient practices that have been forgotten.
Your teacher is Irish?
But there is no division in that world. So
but I mean, I just always get that feeling about Ireland. There's that porousness, isn't there? There's
the veil
something still
between
there.
worlds.
The veil's not quite as strong as what it is in some places.
Yeah, exactly. And in part of, yes, I think part of the work that I've been doing is kind of going to a place that is actually beyond, like I said, beyond the division between, this, the kind of invisible magical world in this world, being able to see the places where they live in each other. And that, again, this division that we've put up perhaps is an illusion. And that we can have access to that other dimension. in the story of Ireland, that, when that actually, that the mythical people, the magical people, the Tuatha Danann, were, when there was actually a war, the agreement was that they went underground, and the people who are modern day Ireland, Irish people, live on the above ground, and these are the people who would live in the fairy mounds and live underground. But that actually, that sense of division between above and below, I think is actually probably melting away, when we're starting to see, as even they say, as above so below, as within so without, that it's, yes, we can have access to that wisdom.
So what do you think about this time in general? This time of great transition. I remember you were saying you went to see California Institute, and Rick Tarnas was saying in the Great Initiation or whatever that it seems like a time where that opening is happening with many people. Exactly. Or would you say it like that?
It's such an interesting question, because I really find this when I talk to almost anybody, and I imagine everyone, if you feel the same way, that when you talk to anyone, there is this feeling that the world is changing, that the old world is dying. And my own visions from my own experiences have been speaking very clearly to the crumbling of this old world. We talk about the patriarchy falling down, but we talk about, and also for me, I think about this focus on matter, and realizing that we actually live in an energetic universe. And that is, I think, is, in that part of what I said about reinfusing Newman into matter, recognizing the spirit into matter, that making it alive again. And one of my mantras has been this Hebrew phrase: the old shall be made new and the new sacred. How do we find these ancient practices and to, these ancient, and make them new and make them sacred again? I think we're all experiencing something of a real turning point, of feeling that, the paradigms, our paradigms of the past are really kind of crumbling. And people like Joanna Macy talking about the great turning. The phrase that has come to me in my work is what I'm calling it the great reciprocity, which I think is this sense of the sharing in the field, the sharing, this sense of what one of the messages from these medicines is, I can't harm you without harming myself. And that sense of what I do to you, I do to myself. And what I do to the planet, I do to myself. That there is this sense of we are in this great reciprocity, and this great sharing. And I think the more we also live in a culture that's very much about grabbing and owning and possessing, and you look at the addiction, it's all about more. We live in a world about more, but there's also something about how do we let go and allow this it's trusting there's a flow.
The opening and the flow, that's just what the word I was going to use. And it's kind of like the hidden wealth of sharing, how things grow through that, and how it aids not only ourselves but others, and then others. It comes, so there's all those arrows in between everything that it's flowing between it and increasing.
Exactly.
And it's, in a way, the way people are sharing knowledge and sharing their experiences, sharing different wisdoms, sometimes sharing indigenous wisdoms. It's increasing.
Right. Yeah. That's my sense of the world that hopefully we're needing to move towards, which is really a relational world. It's like what I was saying about my own relationship with the medicines is relational. and rather than about consuming. And, you know, while I do ingest them, you do ingest these medicines, there's something about it. It's, how is it sacramental? And my, yeah, so at least that's my.
I think maybe in the beginning of, yeah, I don't know what's the words are, let's say setting off on a bit of a path, you know, maybe we do separate a little bit because it's the only way we can understand it too. You know, you've got the sacred and the profane or whatever and da-da-da. But it's like moving along. It's how they're coming together and becoming the one thing.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, I imagine that, you know, yes, we do. Yeah, we do need to somehow. Yeah, we need to separate things out to be able to understand them, and then hopefully, then you'd be able to sometimes be able to get the big picture. But you can't often start out with the big picture. Exactly, that you sometimes need to kind of do the work of understanding.
And Susan, can you share with us some of your, you know, perhaps a dream or two that's been very important to you along the way that has shaped how you think about everything?
So there's, you know, there's been, as you can imagine, several really big dreams that have been guiding me in this work that I'm doing, and been, you know, along with the work with the medicines, I feel like the way that the dreams weave in with this has been really important. But I think I was saying that, well, actually, you know what I'm going to say is I'm going to start someplace different than I thought I was going to go to. So I'm changing gears here. We were talking about the world changing, and one of the things that I realized is that I think one of the things that's changing is, I think, realizing some of the ways that we are, the illusion of, speaking of the illusion of kind of this, you know, kind of the world of separation. And one of the series of dreams that I've had a lot for a while was this idea of being in prison, and the doors are open, and I'm realizing that nobody walks out. And I'm just watching this and I'm thinking, why doesn't anybody leave? And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll leave. Should I leave? And then I'm thinking, but what if I'm caught again? And then I thought, you know, I'm going to take the risk and leave. and I think that there's a way that we can be in a prison of the known world, and that our senses narrow, and we actually don't see that maybe the prison doors are open and we can walk out. And so I, you know, having had a series of these dreams where I realized that this is a little like, you know, Plato's allegory of the cave, that in a sense that we may be prisoners chained to a wall, watching these reflections on a wall, and maybe are afraid to be able to walk outside and see. And I think what this medicine does is like, it's like a view outside of the prison walls. It's like shaking up the default mode network that says, no, this is who you are, and this is what the world is. It's only this. And it's saying, oh, but maybe there's a lot more out there.
So in one way, it's like we've got the official narratives, haven't we? We've got our partisan politics that we're heavily into. You know, you have to be on one side, and we've got all this and the narrative or whatever. But from what you're saying there, it's also like it's just being prepared to live with that, yeah. or to go out and to live with that larger reality.
Exactly. It's like to be able to have the courage. I mean, I may say, do you mind if I share one other dream? Because I think that it connects to this, is that this was a really significant dream for me. I was in the dream. It took place with the context of Katrina. And so that, you know, people had fled Katrina. We're all in this astrodome, and we are all in this large domed building. And the most gigantic whale I have ever seen came, and it just simply flipped its tail. It wasn't, trying to do anything, but except just flipping its tail, cracked open the ceiling. And so suddenly I'm talking about limits that, that suddenly it's open, and then it's suddenly open to the sky. And for whatever reason, I get on top of the whale and I am riding this whale. And I've gotten on before I've really thought. It's just, this is what I know I'm supposed to do, is ride this whale. And I'm aware that it is it's swimming fast and it's heading towards open ocean. It's almost like, in Venice, like, it's going through some narrow areas, but it's going out towards open ocean. And I know that my task is to jump off when I see home. And I know that it's not going to stop for me. It's not like a bus where it's going to say, here, here's your little stop and here you go. But that I will have to take the risk. But I know that if I don't take the risk, I surely will die, because it's going out into open ocean and I'll drown. So I know that I have to take the risk, even though the jumping off itself may kill me. And I wake as I jump off this whale. And I feel like this is, for me, been the work of the medicines, is to crack open the limitations. And you think about Katrina, a place of trauma, and all the things that narrow our world. And it cracked open and riding this kind of cosmic being. But the task is to bring it in, bring it home. It's no good to have these amazing experiences and just go drown in the ocean. And that's,
it's not like in the 60s where we just wanted the peak experience. It's like, what happens after the peak experience, and how do you bring it back? And that is jumping off a whale.
That's the risk of, I was terrified because it was, like I said, it may kill me to do it, but that's the task, is to jump off the whale and to bring it home. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do, is to share this and to bring it home and not just drown it in the sea with it.
And to use a bit of Jung speak, because sometimes when we talk about psychedelics and we talk about the transcendental experience or the peak experience too, but the whale flicking its tail just reminds me of the deep unconscious, and it's a wild ride. It's not that
Right.
The unconscious is just full of lovely things. It's full of the most beautiful things, but it's also, there's that light and that dark, of the whole of life, perhaps.
Exactly.
And as that deep unconscious is stirring within us, that perhaps so many people are having that kind of experience too at this time. That how do you ride that experience?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, the part of the dream, which is saying that the fear of death, is that, you exactly that. It's like learning to ride these experiences that are, they bring us to our edges. Mm. And, how do we learn to be with that?
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that might be a good place to finish, Susan. And thank you for all of that. And I hope that the conference at Pacifica in the middle of December, I hope that's a good experience for all.
Thank you. Yes. No, I hope so too. Yes. At Pacifica Graduate Institute. Yes. Near Santa Barbara. Is it? Yeah. If anybody's interested. Yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye now.